the thing that I always tell people is, especially people in AI, is say, people are really smart. Don't forget that people are really smart. We have these abilities. We're constantly updating our database between our ears, and we need to leverage that, not just replace that, especially for things that are rapidly changing, especially for environments where the conditions on the ground are changing week by week, and you don't have historical data, because people are really good at those type of situations, and traditional AI is really bad at it.
Thank you for joining the Change I Am Possible, which is India's first Future Tech Meets Sustainability podcast. And today I'm delighted and honored to have with me Mr. Louis Rosenberg, who's a technologist, inventor, entrepreneur, a writer, and is well known for developing the world's first immersive augmented reality system for the US Air Force, and was the founder of the early virtual reality company Immersion Corporation. He is currently the Chief Executive Officer and Chief Scientist of the artificial intelligence company Unanimous AI. So Louis, really appreciate you taking time and being part of our humble effort. Why don't we start with your early days, where you started from, a little bit of a background, and the augmented reality system that you built at the US Air Force and an Immersion Corporation company?
Sure. So I got involved in virtual and augmented reality starting in 1991.
Wow.
And so over 30 years ago. And my first effort in the space was actually, so I was a graduate student at Stanford University. And I was lucky enough to get a part-time job working at NASA and doing virtual reality research at NASA. Spending all that time using VR hardware made me feel really enclosed and isolated. My experience at NASA, all I really wanted to do was be able to say, hey, can we take virtual reality and take it off the screen or out of the headset and put it all over the real world? And so I pitched the idea to the US Air Force to say, hey, what if we could take virtual reality and incorporate it into the real world? And I called that concept virtual fixtures. And I called it, so I should say that the word augmented reality didn't exist back then. And I called it virtual fixtures because I said, imagine if we could allow you to have these fixtures in the real world that were virtual, but help you do tasks, real physical tasks. And so fixtures that look real and sound real, but also feel real. And the analogy that I gave the Air Force back then was to say, think of a ruler. Like a ruler in the real world could let you draw a straight line very, very easily. Without a ruler, it takes a lot of mental effort to draw a straight line. You'll go very, very slow, and it won't be very straight. But if I give you a ruler, that's a fixture that could allow you to draw this straight line very, very quickly. And I said, well, what if it wasn't a real ruler, it was a virtual ruler? A virtual ruler that you could just bring into your world and allow you to perform tasks. And imagine I wasn't trying to draw a straight line. Imagine I was trying to perform surgery. And I'm a doctor trying to perform surgery. Could I bring a virtual fixture in, overlay it onto my patient, and that fixture actually guide my scalpel? And the Air Force said, okay, that sounds great. Let's see if we can just do some experiments to prove that's possible and has value. And so I went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where they had lots of hardware for human-computer interaction, and I developed what's called the Virtual Fixtures platform. And so that was my experience with augmented reality back before there was augmented reality. So in 1993, I founded Immersion Corporation, which was one of the early virtual reality companies. It was seeing how excited people got when they just tried. Again, things were simpler back then. Even when they tried, the most basic augmented reality and virtual reality, that made me say, "Hey, we should bring this to markets."
Right. Yeah. What a fantastic journey. You saying you started in 1991. That was seriously early, and at that point of time, it was not called augmented reality, but you called it virtual fixtures, because that's what it is in some sort. Because the intention with augmented reality is to create virtual objects which is as real as possible, which is fixed into the real world, and where we can touch, feel it. So tell me, from 1991 to 2022, which is 30 years plus, what are your views on the evolution of augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality? Are you excited that it's exactly gone the way you thought it would go, or what are your views on the current status of virtual reality?
The biggest thing is it took a lot longer than I expected it to take. Um, we expected that within 10 years, it would be everywhere, right? And that didn't happen. um, and it didn't happen. And I will say, in 93, 94, 95, virtual reality was still really, really hot field. There were, covers of magazines, and, everybody was talking about virtual reality as like the next big thing. And then at the end of 95 and 96, suddenly the internet became the next big thing. And we got the .com bubble. And it was really, all of the investment and all of the enthusiasm, I was in Silicon Valley, all of the energy really went to the internet, and virtual reality kind of became, that thing we were excited about before that didn't really pan out. And for 15 years, from about 1997 to 2012, virtual reality was dead. And people often ask me, like, why did the industry come back to life in 2012? And they say, well, was it because of the Oculus, when the Oculus came out? And I say, well, no, it wasn't the Oculus that brought the industry back to life. It was the iPhone. And so it was really the smartphone industry that allowed head-mounted displays to emerge again in 2012, 2013 at an affordable price with much higher resolution, much higher quality. And then the industry emerged again, and really has not slowed down. And I don't think there's going to be another kind of VR winter for 15 years, because now all the largest companies, it's not just startups, it's, every major corporation is pushing hard in VR and AR. And so I think it will happen for real this time. And that's my perspective over the last 3 decades of this industry.
Right. Yeah. I think the AR, VR, MR is in such an exciting space. What you were doing in 1990s is now finally becoming a reality. There are use cases in the medical fields. There's haptic feedbacks, which is becoming reality. There are actually doctors who are performing surgery, with the help of HoloLens or Oculus Quest 2, and those things are finally becoming realities. There are education institutes who are leveraging virtual reality, or leveraging mixed reality, and yes, the big movement, obviously, it's the rebranding of Facebook to Meta. I think that's done, that's created so much hype, and the entire world has gone bonkers, because of the word called Metaverse, and every next company wants to be a Metaverse company. So there is this one side, because I've been invested in the space since 2015. So I've been forever waiting for virtual reality to find its space, and somehow this is the time that it's got its glory. But the whole Metaverse thing, that hype versus the fact, is something which I think needs to be bought out. And you've been putting out a lot of articles out, and I read your recent article on the Tech Crunch also. So would you like to talk about Metaverse and its pros and cons? First, maybe you could just possibly explain what Metaverse is, and then maybe you could describe the opportunity that it presents and also the negatives of the Metaverse.
Sure. So, this whole thing kind of falls into this category of immersive media. And in immersive media, there's, I would say there's virtual reality and there's augmented reality. And it's worth just defining those first. Virtual reality is an immersive first-person environment which is fully simulated. Augmented reality is an immersive first-person environment where you have a mix of real and virtual, and it's mixed so authentically that you feel like you're interacting with one reality where some of the objects are real and some are virtual. And I say that because a metaverse can be either virtual or augmented, but a metaverse takes this one step further and says, okay, it's a world, a persistent world that's immersive, that's experienced in the first person, and it has large numbers of simultaneous users who all have this shared sense of presence. And so that's how I would define a metaverse. Some people go a little bit further and say it has to have rules of governance and an economy. I think that's restrictive. I don't think we need to add that. There are other folks who also add that it has to be interoperable. There'll be lots of worlds that can all exchange data and exchange goods and services. I think there will be lots of worlds that can do that, but I also think there'll be self-contained worlds that will be a full, consistent metaverse. And by virtual metaverse, I mean a completely simulated world populated by avatars where we all interact as avatars. They look cartoony. They'll look better over time. But I personally don't think I think that will happen. It will be popular. It will be popular for socializing. It will be popular for gaming. But I don't think it's going to transform society. I don't think that most people are going to spend most of their day in a virtual metaverse. On the other side, there's what I would call the augmented metaverse, which is the real world that is now embellished with virtual content. And I think the augmented metaverse will transform society. I think that within 10 years, it will be the way that most people in industrialized nations interact with digital content.
Right. Yeah. So obviously, I mean, there are a lot of people who've got like lots of different views. Some say that it's going to be a convergence of technology. It's not just going to be augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality. It's going to be your 5G. It's going to be your blockchain, which is going to create a decentralized world. Interoperability is going to be play a main role. Then the artificial intelligence, once it comes in with IoT, because the entire world is being scanned with all the scanners. So yes, there is a camp which says that it's going to be a convergence of everything. It's going to be decentralized, interoperable. But then you are saying that it's going to be a virtual world and a augmented world. So these two different worlds, a virtual world will be in the future, where then we'll be kind of like possibly creating this virtual world maybe someday where it will be indistinguishable from reality, and then there'll be, which could add a lot of benefits, but it could add a lot of negatives also. And the augmented reality, you saying, is the place where the world will have the most opportunity. You are the founder of Unanimous AI, working on Swarm AI. Can you start explaining what do you mean by hive mind?
My entire career, even going back to virtual reality and augmented reality, has really been about how can we use technology to amplify human abilities. And about 10 years ago, I became interested in how can we use technology to allow people to make better decisions together. And as I started working in that space, I looked to Mother Nature, which is really how a lot of technologies get inspired. And it turns out that we humans have been making decisions in groups, especially large groups. We use votes and polls and surveys to try to understand how, the opinions of people, and then we aggregate that data, and then we think that that's going to give us a good decision. If you look at other species that function in large groups, they've been evolving their abilities for hundreds of millions of years. And I'm talking about schools of fish and flocks of birds and swarms of bees. And they can make really good decisions, even though they're very simple organisms. What they actually do is they form real-time systems. And that's the term that biologists use. Even for fish, they call it a swarm intelligence. It comes from bees because bees were the first to be studied, and bees are really remarkable. A swarm of bees can make really sophisticated decisions. Kind of the classic decision that was studied really in the 1950s is choosing a home. And so if you're a swarm of bees, which is like a colony of about 10,000 bees, every year or two, they have to find a new home. And what they do, it's actually amazing. They send out scout bees, hundreds of scout bees that will search 30 square miles and find dozens of potential homes. And they'll go and they'll investigate these homes, and they'll come back to the hive. And now they might have 10 different homes to choose from, and they have to make a decision. And the thing is, they're very sophisticated in how they make their decisions, because they're going to need to choose a home that's large enough to store the honey they need for the winter, and that's ventilated well enough to stay cool in the summer, and insulated well enough to stay warm on cold nights, and has to be near a good source of water, and has to be near a good source of pollen. And so it's this multivariable equation that they need to solve. And a single bee has a brain that's about the size of a grain of sand. It cannot solve a multivariable equation, but a swarm of bees actually can, and it picks the best possible solution most of the time. And they do it by forming these real-time systems that push and pull and converge on an answer. And they actually also do it by vibrating their bodies. Biologists call that a waggle dance, because it looks like the bees are dancing, but they're really just generating signals and combining the signals and negotiating and converging on these answers that would be difficult for a person to solve that problem, and yet a swarm of bees can do it. And so about 10 years ago is when I said, well, if birds and bees and fish can get so much smarter by working together in a swarm, why can't people do that? What if we can connect groups of people together to do that? We didn't evolve to function that way, but we now have the internet, and we now have these fast connections. And so I founded Unanimous AI to say, okay, let's create an interface, let's create a system where we can connect teams of people together anywhere in the world and have them function as a swarm. And people can't waggle dance like bees. So we created an interface that where people use their mouse and control little magnets, and it actually looks a little bit like a Ouija board on a screen. There's a question pops up, and they use their mouse, and everyone pulls on the answer. Everyone's pulling in different directions, and then we have AI algorithms that are watching everybody's behaviors and combining all their different sentiments and allowing the group as a swarm to converge on an answer. And it's, again, very much modeled on how biological swarms work, using AI to do the things that we weren't evolved to do. And it turns out that it works. It allows groups of people to become significantly smarter, to make significantly more accurate decisions and forecasts and predictions.
So there is so much that we have to learn from nature. There's so much we can learn and apply it into and build something useful. So of what I understand, you are using humans in the loop. They'll be given some questions, and these humans make the decisions, and there's an algorithm behind which kind of takes the decision of what is right. Is the algorithm evolving? Does it take decisions on its own? What are the applications? Would you like to unpack that?
Sure. So the thing that really makes what we do different than most AI. So most AI companies are really pushing to replace people with algorithms. And there are certain fields where that works. There's lots of fields, lots of different domains where there's not lots of historical data, that the world keeps changing over time. But humans are, we are data collection machines, right? We're like those scout bees out in the world, learning about the world, collecting information about the world. And so our approach is to say, well, let's, instead of applying AI to some historical database, let's use AI to connect groups of people together, because they already have the data in their heads. What we need to do is figure out how to combine their knowledge and wisdom and insight and experiences in the most efficient way. And so the way we do that is we have these groups of people log in. So it's synchronous, meaning a question is going to pop up on all their screens at the same time. Let's give a specific example, like, because we work with financial groups who are doing sales forecasting, market forecasting, hedge funds that are predicting the stock market. And so if we work with a hedge fund, or if a hedge fund uses our technology, and maybe they have 20 analysts who study the market, they'll log in. Question will pop up asking them to forecast, how a particular equity is going to move over the next 2 weeks, and they're all going to use their mouse to push and pull on. Again, it looks like a glass puck, and they're moving it to an answer, but they're all pushing and pulling. It's like a three-dimensional tug of war, and the AI algorithms are watching how all the different participants behave. And so our algorithms are trained on understanding how these people interact with each other to figure out who are the people who have really high conviction, who are the people who have low conviction, because they're all not equal. Some of them might really have a strong sense of, on a particular question, what's going to happen. Others might have a less strong sense. And so it's combining their insights, it's evoking their behaviors, and it's allowing the group in real time to converge on an answer. The really interesting thing about this approach is it uses AI to help people make better decisions. And so it works. It doesn't matter what the question is. As long as the group of people is knowledgeable about a topic, we can take that group of people and make them significantly smarter, allow them to work together and make smarter decisions. And they can be anywhere in the world.
Right. Yeah, I think this is such a better way at looking at artificial intelligence, because I think I think most of the companies around the world are working on artificial intelligence, and the intention is to create more and more automation, or create machines that can possibly do all our jobs, or everything. But here you are saying that you would require a certain group of people, minimum 5 experts who understand the area of the problem, and they will be given the choice, and the algorithm learns from it and takes a decision. This thing, does the algorithm is it able to do things on its own, or every time you need the humans in the loop? What are the applications of the future that you are excited of for Swarm AI?
Yeah, so a few things. So the technology that we use always has people in the loop. So we're never replacing people. We're just making groups of people smarter. And the way we think about it is that we can connect a group of people together. It could be 5 people, it could be 500 people, and we turn them into a superintelligence, a human superintelligence, right? And again, what we're really doing is we're just allowing groups of people to combine their insights in optimal ways. And so it requires people. And so there's a few different ways to describe the why is this beneficial? Well, one reason is that, while traditional artificial intelligence is really good at looking at historical data, a lot of problems don't have historical data that's useful, because AI is not good at extrapolating into the future with limited data about the future. Humans are great at extrapolating into the future. Radiology is a field where just traditional AI has made a lot of progress, because you can train an AI on, tens of thousands of x-rays, and it can be quite good at doing automated diagnosis. We tested that against small human groups. And what we found was that the small human groups were just as good as these very sophisticated AIs, but they were good in different ways. Meaning a traditional machine learning AI was really good at diagnosing x-rays that looked a lot like all the images it saw before. The human groups were really good at diagnosing x-rays that didn't look anything like was seen before, that were different. And so what we actually developed with Stanford was to say, there's different strands, and these systems should work together. If you have if you have an X-ray to evaluate, and it looks really standard, looks like just like 1,000 other X-rays, a traditional AI could be good at it. But for all those cases that look different, a swarm of humans is actually a better way to do it. And when you combine those approaches that way, you can actually exceed the ability of humans or AI. And I think will be lots of applications like that. Yeah. So right now we have lots of interest in forecasting, and there's lots of companies that are using swarm AI to do sales forecasting, market forecasting, financial forecasting, and that's really interesting. What gets even more interesting to me is decision making, because we can allow groups of people to make better decisions. One of our customers for swarm AI is actually the United Nations, and the United Nations uses swarms to forecast famines around the world. And so they have they would describe it as predicting food insecurity. And so there's a group inside the United Nations that has experts scattered all around the world, they've used various methods of having those groups of people get together either in person or as a conference call, and try to come to decisions about which countries have the highest risk of having food insecurity over the next 18 months. And over a year ago, they started using Swarm for this, and they found that they were able to reach really good decisions significantly faster and more efficiently when they connect together as a swarm, because it allows them to combine all these different opinions. Ultimately, I get most excited about those type of applications because they have the potential for good.
Lovely. Lewis, thank you for taking time and being part of the podcast. In a world where we are creating machines that are more and more intelligent and which could get more and more autonomous, we're missing out the point that humans need to be in the loop, and Swarm AI could just be that technology which could keep forever humans embedded with machines, So wish you the very best. Since the podcast is from India and my audience is largely from India, and you are a writer and writers, I believe, have the vision to kind of peek into the future. Would you like to share what are the risks and the opportunities for India and Indian people for this decade?
I don't know that I can speak specifically to India, but I would say just in general, we've talked a bit about the metaverse, and I think that the metaverse and virtual and augmented reality will become popular in India, popular in the US, popular around the world. As somebody who's been involved in those technologies from the beginning, I'm excited about them, but I'm also worried about the impacts of the metaverse on society. And I say that because it's going to allow technology platform providers to monitor people at levels that we've never seen before. And it's worth saying that because, if you look at social media can track where people click, right? It tracks, and it learns a lot about us by just where we click, right? In the metaverse, in virtual and augmented reality, the platform providers are going to be able to track where we look and how long our gaze lingers. And if in augmented reality, when we're walking down the street, where do we slow down and look in a store window, or And so the invasiveness of these technologies to understand us, to track us, to monitor us is going to increase by an order of magnitude. And we should, all of us in every country should push to make sure the platform providers can't use that data in manipulative ways. And I say that because, I generally talk about the kind of the three risks of the metaverse as the three M's: monitoring, manipulation, and monetizing. Because the metaverse will allow these platform providers to monitor us as never before. And once they can monitor us, they can then manipulate us as never before. And by manipulate us, I say, well, now that they know where you are and where you're looking and what you're doing, in the augmented future, when you walk down the street in India wearing augmented reality glasses, advertising is not just going to be a pop-up ad. It might be a virtual product placement that a third party puts into your world. You might walk down the street and see somebody drinking a particular soft drink, and they might look real, and you might think, oh, that looks popular. You might go down the next street and see another person drinking that soft drink and think, oh, that looks real, and not realize that those were just virtual things injected into the world for you, particularly targeting just you, so that you think that particular soft drink is popular. And unless we regulate the space so that platform providers have to tell you when something is not real, that something is, you've been targeted, when something is virtual, the ability for them to manipulate us will be much worse than, let's say, what they do right now in social media. Right now they're doing the same thing, but at least an advertisement is an advertisement. In virtual and augmented reality, it will just seem like it's part of the world, whether it's a virtual product placement or there will be virtual characters that engage you in conversation that you think are real, and they're really trying to sell you something. And so I think in every market and in every country, everybody should think about, well, these technologies are really powerful. They need to be able to do this tracking because you need to do it to make it work. But if we put regulation in place to limit what they can do with the data, that would help a lot. And if we put regulation in place so they have to tell you if they're targeting you with virtual content that might look perfectly real, but tell you, no, that's not real. We put that in there, an advertiser paid us to put that into your world. It's an advertisement. Don't believe you just happen to come across that. And so I would say that, those are things that I think over the next 10 years are really the biggest risks that this next trend in technology are gonna bring upon all of us.
Right. Thank you for sharing your insight and foresight. Yes, the world that we are getting into is going to be exciting, super exciting as well as scary. The choice is upon us. We need to all come together and make sure that the direction that we are heading into the future is in safe people's hand, because that's the most important thing. So really appreciate you taking time. Wish you and the team the very best. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button. Until next time, see you guys. Thank you, Louis. Really appreciate this.
Yeah, thank you.